guys, Lifting here. This week's Path of Exile build showcase is going to focus on the meta skills of the league. What is a meta skill, you may ask? A meta skill or build is what the general conception agrees on to be the strongest or best relevant to the content it has to deal with. It is also the builds that are played the most and hence most popular. The builds I present in this video all fit that category and are chosen based on the statistics from PoE.Ninja with the Legion Softcore League in mind. It's important to understand though that while there is often a good reason for something to be considered meta, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually better than anything else. There are lots of build variations that can be just as good that either simply hasn't been recognized yet or just does something otherwise really well that just isn't the main focus of the currently running league. Another important factor here is that what is currently being considered meta is fluid. Sometimes it's just a matter of the player base recognizing something different or new for it to change, and then that become part of the meta. So what I'm trying to say here is that don't get too hung up on the whole meta category label. It constantly changes, and if a build is not considered meta, then it doesn't necessarily mean that it can't be good either. However, this week's 5 builds definitely fit that meta category. Before I start the presentation, allow me a moment to recognize my supporters over at Patreon. A big thanks to you guys as always. It's not a big secret that YouTube ad revenue isn't exactly lucrative, and your contributions make the world of a difference. Thank you very much. If you are interested in becoming a patron and supporting future content, then please visit patreon.com/liftingnerdbro. I appreciate your time. I release this type of video each week, so if you enjoy this type of content or simply looking for more inspiration, then hit that subscribe button and bell icon to be notified of future video releases. Alright, let's get into it. Meta build number 1 is a Cyclone Slayer build, and in this case by Shepuuurd. It may not come as a big surprise to anyone that Cyclone currently by far is the most played skill in the league. The skill itself received a lot of promotion leading up to the league launch, and it received a significant rework in 3.7, which obviously got a lot of players excited, myself included. Because of this, at the current time of me recording this, Cyclone is played by more than 48% of any character above level 93 as their main skill in Legion. Think about that for a moment. Almost half of any high-level character in the current league is playing some variation of Cyclone as their main skill. That statistic is insane just by itself, but it isn't without good reason. In 3.7, Cyclone was turned into a channeling skill rather than staying as a normal attack skill. It received a significant damage boost, and it had its area of effect greatly increased too. Besides this, Cyclone and similar functioning skills have always seemed to have this special place in ARPG games. From back in the days with Whirlwind in Diablo 2, then Diablo 3, and recently Grim Dawn released their version of the skill Eye of Reckoning, and it has instantly become a player favorite for a big part of the player base. There's just something that makes us want to go all out in a whirling frenzy on anything we encounter on our path for some reason. Now, Shepuuurd's build is played as the Slayer, with the goal of boosting the general damage output via Headsman, being able to call enemies at 20% health rather than the typical 10% via Bane of Legends, greatly boosting accuracy and area of effect through impact, and adding a powerful boost to critical strike chains and damage by picking up the new Ascendancy, Overwhelm. Whether you go crit or non-crit Cyclone is a personal build choice. Both setups are viable, and typically the non-crit variants will trade the Overwhelm Ascendancy for Endless Hunger in return for some powerful leech potential instead. Of noteworthy gear, Shepuuurd's build feature items such as the Devoto's Devotion Helmet, the Count's Heart Body Armor, the Mark of the Elder Ring, the Lion's Raw Flask, and then 3 unique jewels including the Transcendent Flesh, a Watcher's Eye, and one of the new all too confusing unique jewels, in this case called Lethal Pride. Shepuuurd's build is incredibly girthy and deals massive amounts of damage. It can take on any content in the game, but due to Cyclone also being so popular at the moment, then one can also expect the items suggested by this build to be expensive, or at least more expensive than what you may be used to normally. Now, to me personally, it seems a bit ridiculous how powerful Cyclone currently is, and how easy it is to get to the point where it clears the entire screen. And that's not to criticize this build, It's just a general observation of the current skill design. I wouldn't be surprised if Cyclone received a nerf to AoE sometime next league start, but who knows. Make sure you try it out now before it may be too late. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that Shepuuurd had recently released his own take on the Cyclone skill, as I know him to create great build guides, some of which I have featured in the past too. Check it out. The second build of this week's list is an Ascendant Contagion Trickster by Ghazzy. So just like Melee received a big rework in 3.7 with Legion, spells received a big rework in 3.6 Synthesis. No one even knows what a bow build is anymore, but that is a different discussion. Together with the spell rework, Ascendant received some crazy buffs too. The damage was increased and the projectile could now explode and hit multiple targets on impact. The thing is, Ascendant was actually really good before that buff, and I know that for a fact as I was playing Ascendant build just prior to it getting buffed in 3.6. So what does that mean? It means it got OP. Now, does that explain why up to 15% of any level 93 plus character is currently playing Ascendant in Legion by itself? No, not by itself. You see, there is another great reason for that. Let me show you this clip. What's happening here is that due to the nature of Contagion and its ability to spread the Ascendant dot to nearby enemies, it is able to spread it to pretty much the entire Legion monolith and kill them all with just a single cast. And I mean, even if you aren't really into spells or whatnot, then you cannot deny that this has to feel pretty damn good. Obviously, a certain amount of damage is going to be required for Ascendant to effectively deal with high tier Legion encounters, not to mention that for Contagion to spread this effectively, it also is going to require the skill to be of a certain level and possibly also have a decent amount of area of effect scaling. There are of course also situations where the map layout or monster density will break the chain and so forth, but the point is that Ascendant, while already being pretty damn strong just by itself, interacts greatly with the new Legion mechanic. Ghazzy's build is played as the Trickster, which offers great offensive bonuses through Patient Reaper and Prolonged Pain, but also a very powerful defensive mechanic that allows for great sustain through Ghost Stains and Escape Artist by combining both Life, Energy Shield and Evasion together. Of noteworthy gear, Ghazzy's build feature items such as the Heris, Ire, Chest Armor and the Atziri Step Boots. The nice thing about this particular Ascendant setup is that despite the skill being very much meta, then the items that it's going to require or want to obtain at some point is actually rather cheap, and for anyone who hasn't started the league yet, this build definitely also fits the role of being a good league starter. Coming up third on this week's list is a Tornado Shot Deadeye build by Speedybean. Now, I know I made the joke earlier that no one even knows what a bow build is anymore, but in reality that has more to do with these types of builds not having received much attention from GGG in a long while, and not necessarily how good they are or how many people are actually playing them. As a matter of fact, Tornado Shot builds have been a stable meta contender for the many past leagues, and it's not without good reason. First of all, Tornado Shot by itself is a strong skill, and when paired with the right type of weapon, it can reach some impressive damage numbers, and due to the nature of the skill and the way arrows fly outwards in each direction after the first hit lanes, it can cover a huge area of effect too. That said, most people who play Tornado Shot these days do it with the intent of building it as a Magic Find type of build, with the focus on achieving high IIQ and IIR numbers, which stands for increased item quantity and increased item rarity. These two affixes can increase the amount of items that drop, but also the rarity of the items dropped. For instance, item rarity can make a blue magic item drop as a yellow rare item instead, with enough invested into this type of stat. Typically, however, it is mostly item quantity that Magic Find builds focus on these days, as that also increases the chance of currency items and divination cards also dropping, something which the item rarity modifier doesn't have any effect on. To reach high IIQ and IIR numbers, this build features items such as the Windripper bow, 2 pariah rings, the Bisco's leash belt, the Goldworm boots, and the divination distillate flask. Besides the Magic Find specific items, the build is also designed around the Queen of the Forest chest armor to provide a huge boost to movement speed, And besides that, there's a few other unique items that the build use that you can check out for yourself in the guide. So a fair bit of warning here regarding this build for you new players out there. I think it's important to acknowledge that this may not be the build for you, not until you become more experienced with the game at least. While you can attempt this build, for it to really shine, it will require a bit of know-how in regards to controlling your Atlas, and it's not particularly forgiving in regards to its item setup. It's also not the best leveling build, which to be fair can be said for many bow builds, and it's not really focused around killing bosses. And because of this, I'm afraid that if you are a new player, you may just run into trouble and find yourself in a frustrating position. Saying this, I don't mean to criticize the build. I am after all featuring it, and it is very fast, and it definitely has some potential as a tornado shot magic find build, but it needs to be played by people who know what they're doing. Coming up fourth is an elemental hit Slayer build by Mseabird. So, believe it or not, but we actually have yet another bow build on this week's list, and I honestly can't remember when that last happened. This one used Elemental Hit, a skill that can by design be used as both melee and a ranged attack skill. Each attack with this skill will choose an element at random to deliver the damage. If the attack hits, it furthermore applies damage in an area around the target, with the area of effect being larger if the enemy is suffering from an ailment of the relevant damage type already. In the previous league, Elemental Hit was also a popular choice, however it was primarily played as the Ascendant, which still remain a good choice in this league too. However, it is by far played mostly as the Slayer in Legion, which obviously has to do with the rework this Ascendancy received this time around. As a matter of fact, 49% of anyone playing Elemental Hit in the current league is playing it as the Slayer Ascendancy. Of noteworthy gear, Mseabird's build feature items such as the Farul's Fur body armor, the Frostferno helmet for that potentially sick, +4 to gem levels when corrupted, the Soth's Blood amulet, the Mark of the Elder Ring, a Dying Sun for those extra projectiles, and a Wise Oak flask to further increase the damage output. Besides that, 2 combat focus jewels are also implemented, one that prevents Elemental Hit from dealing cold damage and another one that prevents it from dealing lightning damage. This way you can focus the skill into dealing pure fire damage, and with Avatar of Fire or Soth's Blood in your setup, this also means that any of your non-fire damage sources is going to be converted into fire damage, and this makes the build very easy to scale as you only have to focus on one elemental damage source. It's pretty clever. In Mseabird's own words, this isn't the greatest skill to level with from the beginning, as you will need the Threshold Jewels and Avatar of Fire to be able to scale the damage effectively. That said, Mseabird links to a leveling guide by Theon, who's another great build creator that will give you insight to how to level it as efficiently as possible, and I will leave a link to that too below in the description together with this build. The fifth and final build on this week's list is a Bladestorm Berserker by Incredibie. Now, to be fair, if we had to go really meta, then the Gladiator does by far represent the majority of players who currently play Bladestorm. But due to a lack of proper forum guides for this Ascendancy, I decided on featuring Incredibie's build instead, as he has designed a strong build setup around this skill and has done a good job at writing a proper guide for anyone who's interested in trying it out. As a matter of fact, Incredibie is currently, according to his forum guide, #1 Berserker on the ladder using Bladestorm in the solo self-found Legion League. So it has been going pretty well for him, obviously. With the Berserker, one unlocks a ton of extra damage through Aspect of Carnage, at the cost of also taking some extra damage for your own character. The Berserker also allows one to generate Rage. This is then further amplified by the Rite of Ruin Ascendancy that pretty much triples the effect of the Rage mechanic, thus leaving you with a ton of extra damage, attack and movement speed. This does come at the cost of an unpleasant life degen effect. This is however countered by life leech and general life regen stats in this build. Since the build was designed to work in the solo self-found league, the gearing is obviously very forgiving and you can rely purely on rare gear. Incredibie does however give a few suggestions for anyone wanting to play this build in the trade league on potential specific gear that can benefit the build. These include the Devotor's Devotion or Staconia helmets, the Carcass Jack body armor, the Tombfist gloves, the Bubonic Trail boots, the Mark of the Elder Ring, and the Atziri's Promise and Lion's Raw flasks. Incredibie's build can take on any content the game has to offer and should function as a great league starter too. And that was it for this week's build showcase. This time we focused on the skills that in great part represent the build meta in the current league. Next week we may go a little more hipster. And keep in mind that the meta is constantly changing, and a couple of weeks from now it may look entirely different. Although I'm pretty sure Cyclone and Ascendant will remain amongst the top league contenders throughout the entire duration of the league. I don't have any bonus builds for you this time, but I do however have a bit of extra information that you might find interesting in relation to the current meta. When we look at this league's Ascendancy class distribution, there is currently a huge majority of players playing the Slayer Ascendancy. To be more precise, up to 42% of all players in Legion above level 93 is currently playing as the Slayer. Coming in second, we have 21% of all Legion players as Tricksters. On a third place, 9% are playing the Berserker Ascendancy, and then we have a shared fourth and fifth place of 4% of the players playing either as the Champion or Gladiator Ascendancy. When it comes to the most popular items, the Lion's Roar Unique Flask take the first place of being used by 42% of the players in Legion. The Watcher's Eye Jewel take the second place at 31, which makes good sense as it is very versatile. The new Lethal Pride Jewel takes third place at 20% usage. Devoto's Devotion takes fourth at 17%, and the Spreading Rod Jewel takes the fifth at 15% usage. If we factor out main skill links, we also know that up to 57% of the player base in Legion use Sleep Slame as their movement ability. Then we have a shared 56% of the player base using Blood Rage and the new Flesh and Stone. Then we have 49% of the player base using the other new Blood and Saint skill, and 45% use the new Pride Aura. The most popular weapon setup is currently dual swords at 20%, then two-handed swords at 16%, bows at 15%, and then a shared fourth and fifth place for two-handed axes and wand and shields at 10%. There are a lot more interesting statistics we could dive into, but I'm gonna leave it at this for now. I'm not sure how useful it is to you, but I thought you might find it interesting to know now that we are talking about the meta in this video. If you liked this type of video or found it useful, please consider leaving a like to help me conquer that YouTube algorithm. Don't forget to subscribe for next week's build video, and if you're interested, I also have a Flicker Strike guide coming soon. In the meantime, you can check out my Path of Exile build playlist for more inspiration, or maybe even check my PoE map live video. Trust me, if you haven't seen that already, then you will want to. PoE map live is one of the best things that has happened to anyone who maps in Path of Exile for a long time. Thank you for watching, and bros, do you even nerd?